Once you've imported an audio cut into Enco, there's a couple of things that you're going to want to make sure that you do to edit that particular audio cut so it's most efficient in its use here at the radio station. So I've just imported this song, South of Reality by the Claypool Lennon Delirium. I added it to the Alternative Currents folder, and it's at this point it's ready to go. It can be played on the radio station, but there's a couple of things that concern me. Is there any silence at the beginning or end? How long? Is there a potential fade at the end of the song? Is there any amount of introduction time where it's just music until the lyrics begin? Those kind of things I can set flags for that can be really useful for DJs. So if I highlight that new clip that I imported, and then I hit the edit button at the bottom left of the library window, it's going to open up this small editing screen. And this right here is the waveform that represents the audio in this audio cut. I have the ability to zoom in and out of the audio cut, and I can use this tool here to kind of scroll through that piece of audio, eventually getting to the end of it and seeing the ending. And then I can, of course, play these things. And it's important to know that when you're playing things back from the voiceover booth, you can only hear them through the headphones. So I'm trying to blast that music through the headphones, but you probably heard a little bit of it. But what I need to do is set what's called heads and tails for a couple of different items within this audio cut. The first, which comes up by default here in blue where it says head and tail, that's head and tail for the audio itself. It's determining at what point in this audio track am I going to begin playing. And I can set that at the very beginning of an audio track, or I can set it anywhere in between. Let's say perhaps there's an audio track that has some outtakes or some conversation and some talking before the actual music begins, and I don't necessarily want to keep that in there. I can set the head beyond where that kind of conversation happens and right where the music begins, and then when Enco plays this back, it will only play it, where I set that head marker. So what I'm going to do is zoom in here at the beginning, and you notice the head is placed over here by default at the beginning of the audio track, but there's all this silence here. So I can move the head up to where the music actually begins. And I can do the same thing when I go over to the end of the audio track. Zoom out a little bit so we can see it. And you notice that the tail marker hasn't showed up anywhere. So I would have to click in the bottom right-hand corner for that tail marker to show up and then place it where I wanted it to go. So now I'm effectively removing all the silence from the beginning and the end of this audio track. Now, real quickly, let's say I made a mistake, and I don't like where the head and tail markers are. I can hit this Delete EDL button, and it's going to remove all those little heads and tail markers that I placed there, and let me start over. One really easy thing that you can do is known as InstaTrim here. So up at the top of the editor window, you can see this button that says InstaTrim, and I have heads and tails checked, and a level of -35. This is a volume level, so I'm saying that I want to apply an instant trim on this audio cut, both at the heads and the tails, based on this volume level. So when I hit this InstaTrim button, you'll see that this head marker is going to all of a sudden pop up closer to where the audio begins, because it's instantly trimming away silence that's anywhere below -35 decibels. So I'll hit the InstaTrim button. I'm going to zoom in also a little bit more so you can see it happen. So the head marker is way over here, and I'll hit the InstaTrim button. And see that it automatically pops over there. And if I zoom out a little bit and go towards the end, then it's placed my tail marker. It's trimmed it right to where the last of that little bit of audio is. So that's a really quick and useful tool. It will get you most of the way where you want to be in regards to chopping the silence off of the end. Maybe I'd want to tweak this and move this over just a little bit. That's just fine. Okay, the next thing that I want to do is set a segue marker. So if I didn't explain that, I'll hit the head and tail button here, and it will give me an option of other markers that I can place in here. So I want to set a segue point. And the segue point is going to give me, again, another head and a tail. It's going to tell me exactly when the head is going to mark where an audio track is going to begin to fade, and the tail is going to be exactly when the audio track is going to be completely gone. Additionally, the head marker is going to not only begin the fade out, but it's also going to trigger the next element in my playlist within Enco. So there's sort of like a smooth overlap there. And what I can do, instead of like clicking in the upper left to get my head marker and clicking in the bottom right to get my tail marker, I can do what's called rubber banding with my mouse. And say I know that this is where I want the audio track to end. So I click and hold. And I know this is where I want my audio track to begin to fade. And then I can just release, and it will set my heads and tails for me. So this is the point in which the segue is going to begin and the next element is going to be triggered. And this is when this current audio track is finally going to fade completely out. So I've effectively customized this segue transition for this one particular audio track. The final heads and tail markers that I want to place on here is the talk time, the amount of introduction, music-only time that we have before the lyrics begin in this song. So I'll change again by hitting this segue button and choosing talk time. And I know that talk time is going to be at the beginning of the track. So I'm going back to the beginning and maybe zooming out a little bit because potentially there's quite a bit of an intro time here. And what I can do is just listen to the song by hitting play. All right, so I noticed the point in which that the lyrics began here. So I'm going to do the same technique that I did with the segue points, and I'm going to rubber band that area. So selecting here and going all the way back to right where the audio begins. And it's going to set a head and a tail for the talk time. And what this is going to do, it's so great, is when a DJ plays this song in Presenter, that small play button that's next to the audio cut in the active playlist is now going to have its own unique countdown just for the introduction time of this one particular song. So DJs can take a look at that and take note of it while they're doing their talk set, and they can, very easily understand at what point the lyrics are going to kick in, and they can have a really smooth sort of talk segment going into the next song. So those are the three things that we're worried about in the editor. We want to set heads and tails, segue points, and talk times with every single musical cut that goes into Enco. And then at which point we need to save our progress. Save and then save again. So now all those different markers are set for that particular audio cut, and if I cut out any silence on either side, then the actual length of the audio cut would have changed. But those are the essential tools that you need to be concerned with editing an audio cut after it's been imported into Enco.